welcome, as I think we've already said to everybody this morning. Board members, staff, and guests, and members of the public are advised that the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority board meetings are being audio recorded and will be posted to the authority's Facebook page and website, along with the official written minutes. As such, comments and opinions expressed may be published, and any comments expressed by individual board members, guests, and the general public are their own and do not represent the opinions or comments of the full authority or the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority Board of Directors. The recorded video of the full authority meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the authority meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by the Board of Directors. All mics should now be muted. You will need to unmute yourself before speaking. The chair will be asking for opposition only on items of business. If you oppose, please raise your hand until the chair acknowledges you, or use the chat function. And if so, Chris will be monitoring that for us in the background. Our preference is that you physically raise your hand to communicate where possible, to move, second, or ask questions or express an opinion. Please leave your hand raised until you are acknowledged. When speaking, please remember to give your name first. If any of you experience any technical difficulties, please contact Chris at 519-245-3710, extension 230. If you have to leave a message, he'll get back to you immediately. Mr. Chair, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. Ashley, could you do a roll call, please?
Absolutely. John Brennan? Oh, there you go. I see you. Al Broad?
Yes.
Pat Brown?
Present.
Andy Bruiswicks? I don't see Andy. Andy Bruiswicks? Terry Burrell?
Present.
Joe Foss?
Present.
Larry Gordon?
Present.
Aaron Hall?
Present.
Frank Kennis?
Present.
Brad Loosley?
Present.
Betty Ann McKinnon?
Present.
Kevin Marriott?
Present.
Nettie McEwen?
Present.
Mark McGill?
Present.
Dan McMillan?
Present.
Steve Miller?
Present.
Frank Nemchek?
Here.
Lori Scott?
Present.
Mike Stark?
Present.
And we've received regrets from Jerry Westgate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Welcome everyone to our Scoop Zoom meeting this morning. It probably would have been a nice drive in this morning. We've got great weather, and hopefully this continues on for a while yet. So anyway, welcome everyone. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the Board of Directors accept the agenda for the meeting as presented? Lori, seconded by Terry. Questions? Anyone opposed? Carried. It is requested that each director declare a conflict of interest at the appropriate time on any item within this agenda, in that the director may have a pecuniary interest. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held September the 17th, 2020 be approved and distributed? Okay, Steve Miller and Betty Ann McKinnon. Any questions? Go ahead, Brad. Brad, I think you're muted.
I am. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
In regards to the minutes, there was a motion regarding the enclosed range to be circulated to the municipalities. Has that been done yet?
Go ahead, Brian.
That's my fault. That has not been done. I will make sure that that gets out before the end of the week, Brett.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Board of Directors special meeting held October 22nd, 2020 be approved as distributed? Lori and Terry, any questions? Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up in regards to the, I think the budgets that were sent out to the municipalities. I didn't see the percentage increases. Were we not going to do that with the budget?
Go ahead, Brian.
I'll maybe let Tracy address that. I know she sent out the information to the municipalities.
Okay.
Sorry, I sent out basically the packages as we had sent them out in the past. I don't know that we individually provided percentage increases for that. And I believe when we talked about moving forward, or the board wanted a copy of the changes as a result of the CBA. I'll have to go back and double check where that went.
And did that go out, Tracy?
I'll have to double check where that went.
Oh, okay. So, Brad, we maybe need to deal with both of those things. Make sure that the CVA one goes out as well as the individual percentages for each municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Could we get one from the, could that be copied to the board as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any opposed to the October 22nd meeting minutes? All motions carried. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder that the Board of Directors acknowledges the General Manager's report dated November the 4th, 2020? Okay, Dan and Natty, any questions? Did you have any comments on that, Brian, or are you okay with that?
I think Mike had a question. Sorry, Joe.
Sorry, Mike, go ahead. You're
I
muted.
guess this would follow up on my previous question. Will this general manager's report incorporate the recent email? I presume it will.
Yes. Yes. I think we need to include everything, all three different documents that you've received.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
And that's the case, I presume we're going to open up a discussion now relative to that particular issue. Or Brian, are you going to lead in with a summary leading to a discussion?
I can certainly do that. That might be easiest, and we might have some better discussion that way if that's permissible, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, well, that works for me.
Okay, wonderful. So much to my surprise, and as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I did not expect that they would be including these changes within the budget document, but they have. It's pretty significant when you look at it from 40 plus different pieces of legislation that they're creating changes in with the Budget Act. So what's been proposed, and we've looked at it from a multitude of different avenues, both redlining the existing act and what those changes look like there. We also had the opportunity on Monday to have a webinar with Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks staff. They were able to address some of the questions that we brought forward. Most of them, however, were to be taken back for review. Some of those we'll directly review from the documents we have in front of us. There were a couple of things that were specifically mentioned as having I think what she referred to as limited opportunity for use, but that might be dictated in regulation. So we are assuming that what's going to come out of this still will be some regulations that we have to follow spinning out of this legislation change. I don't have a timeline, and we weren't permitted a timeline or provided one by staff going forward as to when those regulations will be published. And the other thing that we did ask for specifically was trying to determine, I guess, not necessarily where, but what the volume of the concerns that were brought forward were through the consultation that we experienced last spring that most of you were to in London. I guess it wasn't quite spring, it might have been Valentine's Day if memory doesn't serve me correctly. We had 4 of those across the province, and then there was another survey that was sent out. So all that information has been compiled, and we've asked if we can receive a copy of that, at least the summary of that information. That maybe covers the overview. If you don't mind, I would like to we'll walk through what you received today, or what Ashley put into the package, that is titled The Summary of Proposed Amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act and Planning Act through Bill 229. And Chris is going to pull that up for us, so you'll have it right in front of you.
I'm working on it here.
Okay. I think it will be easier if we do it this way, just so that everybody can see it. So we're not dealing with 2 monitors or 2 computers. Does that work better, Mike? Okay. So as you can see, there are a few things that are part of the discussion that have no significant concern for us. So the existing Aboriginal or treaty rights section that was added has, we don't have any concerns there. Members of the Conservation Authority it's being proposed that they will be limited to councillors only, that there will be no public appointments allowed, that the municipalities cannot put forward public appointments to be members of the Board of Directors. A concern not only from the perspective of having, maybe let me back up just a second. All conservation authorities are different. Some of us have larger boards like ourselves, where you get 1 or maybe a couple of councillors from each of the municipalities that sit on the board. In places like Sudbury, where Conservation Sudbury has 5 members on the Board of Directors, all of which are representatives from Sudbury. I believe their council is 6 and their mayor is 7, and therefore basically it's like another board meeting for them, or another council meeting for them, if there were no public appointments. There are a couple of other locations where, again, there's going to be a significant draw from one council or 1 or more councils for the different authorities, where it's almost restrictive to the municipality. Maybe not so much in our case. However, you know, we've certainly had some very strong members, and certainly I'm going to credit Dan live and in person here, who are active and engaged, etc., that do provide benefit to us. And Middlesex Centre itself is one of those areas where they would literally have one council member on each of the authority boards if that was the case, how they spread it out. So it is a little bit difficult to conceive that working well, at least in many locations. The other aspect is the minister is looking to provide an appointment to the board, which I think at this point we have to assume is an appointment with full responsibility and full rights as a board member, being able to vote, having qualifications for potentially even running for chair or vice chair, and that representative would be from the agriculture sector. Undefined as to where that's derived from, whether there's input from the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, whether it's specific to some of the county organizations and their input, that's been left open at this point in time. Go ahead. I'll maybe deal with the questions as they come, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. I can't see who's up. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Yes, Brian, this obviously has, first of all, it says a summary of proposed amendments. Do we have any idea as to when these amendments will come into force?
Basically, because it is part of the budget document, I think it would be potentially enforced as soon as that budget document is approved. Without, there has been no specification as to whether this would be part of the overall transition report, which they're looking at for the end of next year. So I think we're basically, it could be enacted even by year end here, or as late as the end of next year.
Okay, that raises some concerns with the city of Sarnia, in the sense that we are right at, and I don't know what other municipalities are doing, but we are right at the point where we're going to appoint people to committees, to the authority. As a matter of fact, my own appointment, and I'm not sure if Terry is in that same situation, but let's assume that we all are. All three of our appointments would be up for reappointment, including Mr. Bruzewitz. That being the case, let's assume that this is delayed. Let's assume we appoint Andy to as one of our appointees. Then are we going to be forced to retract that appointment, which I think is kind of messy?
I agree 100%. I do, I would say that I don't believe they're going to try and make it that messy, but yourself and Terry and Andy moving forward with 2-year appointments, at some point there might have to be a retraction anyway, even if we're looking at the end of next year. So it will change things likely at some point in time, but I don't believe they'll enforce it as quickly as soon as it's approved.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I can't see hands. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think is our appointments, and I guess I'll refer this to Brian if I can,
Yeah.
the conservation appointments, do we go from, is it February or is it March when our actual term runs out?
So the actual term goes to the annual general meeting, and in the middle of the annual general meeting, we change chairs if an appointment changes. So you actually review all the authority business conducted within the calendar year, and it's approved at the start of the annual general meeting, and then any new members would then take their seat in the middle of the annual meeting in talking about any of the new business going forward.
Is that the end of February or is that the end of March? I can't remember.
End of February, or near the end of February, when we
Our municipal appointments wouldn't really change anything over until that date anyway, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, okay.
But we do have, so Sarnia, St. Clair Township, Strathroy, Caradoc, and Warwick all have provided 2-year appointments following the last election. So each of them will be doing new appointments at the middle of the term here. And those appointments, of course, can go for the entire length of the council term, up to 4 years, if approved that way.
We just did our appointments to the different committees last Monday, but thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Brian.
Chairman Joe, it's Larry.
Okay, Larry, go ahead.
Through you to Brian, you've been discussing the composition changes on boards, but you didn't touch on the duty of member. That to me is a rather contentious suggestion. We're walking a difficult line, as you know, being counselors and responsible to our own communities. But when we walk into that boardroom at the Conservation Authority, we have been instructed really that we're representing the board. And it seems to me that in this legislation, they're suggesting that duty of member, when we walk into the Conservation Authority boardroom, that we're still representing our municipalities primarily. Is that the way, am I interpreting that correctly?
To me, the way I read it, and this was questioned of ministry staff, is basically, are you saying that there is not a responsibility, therefore fiduciary or otherwise, for reviewing or the overall corporation of the watershed? Are you saying that specifically it's just a representation of the municipality? And that's how I read it. Certainly that they've taken that overall watershed concept and kind of set it aside, that it is just a summary of our municipal members and what's and their respective municipal direction. So certainly that's a great concern. Not specifically that I don't think we could make things happen and work on an amicable basis, but to me it really, we're turning the idea completely around, that the corporation and the watershed has a benefit from having broad members from across the watershed to make watershed-wide decisions. If you're making those decisions and you're only wearing your municipal hat, I find it very difficult for board members to understand or have a way to make that decision properly. So that one to me is a very significant concern as well. Oh, sorry.
Is there any other hands? I can't see everybody's hand.
Lori has her hand up.
Okay, Lori, go ahead. Lori, you're maybe muted.
Roll. I was on a roll here. Okay. Anyways, okay. If we as municipal councilors come in and are not on this board as looking after the funds of the corporation or the Conservation Authority, how is that considered to be legal? Because when we walk in, we're making decisions based on the dollars that are in the bank and in investments for the authority as a councillor of another town, and yet we're not really we have some contribution to the budgets and to the things, but we really are not in control of being a municipal councillor. We control the money for the council. To come into here as a board member, we are controlling the conservation money. How can we legally, as a councillor, control the money for the conservation and not be a board member of the conservation in the proper role? That doesn't make sense.
You want to address that, Brian?
I don't have any problem with it. I agree with what Lori's saying, and I can add that to our a summary of our comments that can go back to the ministry.
Please do.
Okay. Is there any other hands?
I thought Mike had his hand up, Joe.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yes. What this reminds me, I was a member of the St. Clair Parkway Commission 30 years ago. And after I left office, I did some work for them in terms of how the St. Clair Parkway Commission would be broken up. It appears to me that this is moving along that same course, where each municipality will inherit the various, if the Conservation Authority were to wind down or to become far less effective in terms of its mandate, I could see that we're moving towards a unwinding of responsibilities, which would be a shame. And this is further to Lori's comment that as much as I think that individual municipalities should be responsible for the assets that fall within their own jurisdiction, there is a bigger issue, and one that this particular body has taken as it relates to Highland Glen, that it is the body has determined that it is a regional facility. Those kind of concerns would disappear. I mean, even though I was in the minority, the fact of the matter is that it was deemed to be a regional facility and therefore should be administered as such. The reality is the way this is moving, and if we are simply looking at look after your own municipal concerns when it comes to being part of this body, it defeats the whole purpose of the body in terms of its broader outlook, its broader context, its responsibilities to nature and to preservation of what we're trying to do here. So I do have some real concerns that this particular movement is going in the wrong direction in the bigger sense of the word. Thank you.
Alan, you had a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Joe. This summary that we have here in front of us that Brian's going through, numerous councils have presented stuff to Minister Urick, and there's numerous things that he's implemented here that actually municipalities were asking for. I know it may not be what the Conservation Authority wants to hear, but there's numerous one of these that, yeah, that's exactly what we were asking for as we're going through this summary. The information that we provided to Minister Urick, there's a lot of the recommendations that he has taken part in. We'll just use that one as a board member. All of Lambton County councilors are all part of Lambton Public Health. So when we go to a Lambton Public Health meeting, you throw your Lambton Public Health hat on, which is fine. We just had COVID just hit us. And there's numerous additional things we could have done, but there was a cost attached to it. Then you got to throw your county councilor hat on because you are the one that is providing the funds to them. And now you got to throw your county hat on, and this is no different. It's great that the Conservation Authority has all these things they want to do. And for the most part, I'll support the majority of them, but there's a cost that's involved, and that's when you have to throw your municipal hat on to make sure the costs don't get out of hand. So I know exactly what Minister Urick is trying to do here. I totally understand. And there was numerous municipalities, I'm sure, that presented these recommendations to him. And it looks like in his summary, he has followed a lot of them. So that's just my 2 cents worth. And I definitely agree with what Minister Urick is trying to do here.
Lori, go ahead.
Well, with what I said before, how can we then, if we're all representing our municipalities, and it's a hat that we wear regularly anyways, how would I then have the right to make a decision on another person's, in another municipality on one of our parks, for example? So if right now Esley Dodge is in the municipality of Lambton Shores, that would mean that I'd be the only one that would have a say on it. Nobody else would, because that's my municipality. Because I don't think municipalities are meant to go into each other's municipalities and make votes. So that's what we would ultimately be doing based on what this is all saying. And I think that's wrong.
Is there anyone else that I've missed? Oh, sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's just a comment too. I look at this, I think this has been coming for some time. I'm not surprised to read any of this. I think, like Al even mentioned, some of these things have been discussed. I knew it was coming. I think we all knew it was coming eventually, but I'm really not surprised with what we have in front of us. And as far as changing hats and wearing hats for different things, we have the authority to do that, and we've done that for years on different committees and different meetings. So I don't have a problem going from one to the other, and you try and keep things in context, but we can legally do that. But I guess my point is, I'm not surprised with this. I think all of us kind of knew something was coming, maybe not to this extreme, but I'm not surprised with this at all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Kevin?
Thank you, Chair Joe. I'd just like to echo Ellen Broad's comments. I really don't think this is meant to take away, is actually meant to give the municipalities, when you're paying the bills, you're giving them back the power to make the decisions. And the fact that it won't really affect this conservation authority that much, I don't think there's any risk here of Mike Stark's comments. I don't think it's meant to be scary like he kind of presented. So the fact that it's not affecting this authority that much, I say, there's bigger fish to fry in my mind. Thank you.
Is there anyone that I have missed? Okay, Frank, I'm not sure which one, Nevchek or Kennan.
Frank Kennis, yeah, I just agree with the previous speakers. I think we always represent our municipality. We have to think about where we're coming from as a municipality, and I think I agree. I think we can all work together, and we've demonstrated that for the common good of the authority as well. So I'm not opposed to a lot of these changes. I'm interested in the agricultural appointment. Some of the stuff we do, I think, is like budget, for example, is based on a weighted vote. If you bring in somebody outside that doesn't represent a municipality, how their vote would be counted and all that kind of stuff. So.
Okay, is there any other speakers?
Chairman Joe?
Pat, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, in Brian's report we received yesterday, that 5.1a, he's suggesting that this be reviewed with your council that you represent for additional any comments. Is that something that you're going to send out through the Conservation Authority, or are we to share this amendments to this bill with our respective councils for comment?
If I may, Mr. Chair, my intention was that coming out of our discussion today, I would basically take this document, and if there were items that we felt we needed to exclude, I would certainly do that, and then forward this on to municipalities as more or less a request from the board to review and provide comments to the minister and through Bill 229 to more or less provide a summary of our questions and concerns.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, did you have anything else, Brian? Do you want to continue on this?
If that's okay, Mr. Chair, I would like to go through this a little bit further. Okay,
go ahead.
Don't think we have any concerns with the meetings. So on to the next page, Chris, please. One of certainly, to me, this one's been identified as a municipal concern by Conservation Ontario. I'm not really sure that that's the only place there would be a concern here. Under the chair and vice chair section 17 amended to clarify term of appointment for chair or vice chair, and that position would have a term limitation of 2 terms or 2 years. That's not been the norm in our past, and we annually elect these individuals, I'm assuming for a reason, whether it's that they do a really good job or they don't do a really good job, etc., in representing you. I'm not quite sure why there would be an impetus to limit the term. I know that there was a statement by ministry staff that it would allow the chair to be passed around a little more frequently. I'm not really, and I'm not trying to maybe blow any sunshine to our current chair and vice chair, but I know that it's a big responsibility, much larger than just administering our board meetings. I know there were a couple of weeks earlier in the year when we could actually see each other, when I saw Joe 4 times in a 5-day week. So we do have, it is a significant undertaking as well. So that particular one was of concern from our perspective. Under the objects, it was identified that there were no significant concerns. Power of authority is the same. Once we get into programs and services, which actually kind of goes over the edge of the page, basically creating that framework for mandatory that hasn't changed from what was previously proposed. What they have added is that there's a potential under regulation for even those things that are above and beyond the mandatory to be itemized or specified by the province. And I'm not really sure why that would be the case, because if Point Edward asks us to take on something like we have in the past, given the opportunity that we can come into an agreement, I'm not sure why that should be subject to provincial approval. So that's kind of what the issue is under programs and services. The agreements for programs and services, I don't have any issue with this whatsoever. It is something that's going to take some time, and we're going to have to work with your municipal staff to make sure that we're all on the same page with a document like this, and then have those signed. At this point, looking at December of 2021, which is what's being proposed, I know some of my cohorts have identified that it might be very difficult to do that because they start their budgeting as early as June of next year. We don't start quite that soon, but there might be some issues in having the budget in place and having these agreements in place for even next September, when we traditionally put forward our budget. Under fees and programs, fees for programs and services. So this is specific to our Section 28 permits, I would say, more than our camping or our, parking or boat launch fees or anything along those lines. So in looking at this, where someone who is applied for and received a permit, who is appealing their fee, if we can't get back to them within 30 days, then that appeal can go right up to the minister, or go to the local planning appeal tribunal. And if they don't deal with it in 30 days, it goes forward. I'm really concerned about the timing perspective on this. We don't even meet every month, so it would be very difficult for us as a board of directors, or you as a board of directors, to be able to support me and provide a response in a 30-day time period during certain parts of the year. So that one's a concern. If we roll over the page, Chris, ministerial review of permit decisions. It's what appears to be specific, and I would say that this is coming out of the development community, is trying to push forward a lot of the appeals that basically at this point the way I interpret it, if someone comes forward and is looking for a permit, they can almost basically go straight to the minister and ask for that permit. They don't even need to land here with us. That's truly what this means to me. There are other ways that if they do receive a no and appeal to the board and you say no, they can all still appeal to LPAT and they can say no. You could still appeal to the minister. So it really gives them at least 3 opportunities to appeal any ruling. Fine, don't have any issue with that. We're trying to cut red tape and cut the number of amount of time on some of these decisions. I'm not sure that that does that. Putting a ceiling of 120 days on any application, I think that makes good sense. I have no problem with that. We're never going to have an issue that way. So there are things of it that make sense, but there are quite a few things that I question as to why we're doing this. It's not going to be to speed it up or make it less complicated on that basis. If we flip one more page, Chris. The entry without warrant compliance is something that's a little bit concerning, partly because of the fact that the revisions that were proposed before that have still not been proclaimed actually provided us with not only the stop work section in the next section, but also changed and improved our ability to enter without warrant. This will take it back to the fact that we'll have to go and apply for a warrant in order to get access to the property. And if it's something we can see from the road, we won't even be allowed to get such a warrant. So there are some issues certainly with that, that things that had been moved forward as far as things that would make the process simpler are being actually withdrawn with this piece of legislation. I think one of the other concerns right in the bottom section of the page being that LPAT is already dealing with a backup and a backlog of issues. So that's a concern. One of the other things, and I'm not really sure that I can nail this one down, but as far as the Planning Act, they're proposing a change to the Planning Act that would remove conservation authorities from being a public body under the legislation. And one of my issues here is we are considered a public body in 100 different other ways, but now we would be excluded under the Planning Act, and it would mean that we can't independently appeal anything to LPAT. So more or less providing that we would act very much like one of the ministries, provide our comments through the one window of the ministry, and would and this of course would be very specific to official plans and official plan amendments that are approved through the authority, or through the, pardon me, through the provincial one window. So it's just concerning as to the lack of clarity that's being put forward with that section. I think that's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Brad, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention some of the confusing part of that. And as Brian is aware of, when we receive things regarding the municipal official plan, they are just recommendations. And sometimes there was a confusing to the individuals, whether that was legislated they had to do, or it was just a recommendation. And that's just a comment. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, I see none. Can we have a mover and a seconder for the general manager's report? Is there any opposed? Seeing none, motion's carried.
A question, Chair Joe, if I might, Larry.
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
With this board and this legislation that appears to be all rolled into the Ontario budget that appears likely to be passed imminently, is there any plan on this behalf of this board to offer any further comment, or is there any purpose in us doing that?
Brian, do you want to address that?
I would love to state for sure that there's a purpose there. I kind of wonder about that at times as to whether we're yelling at the wind, but I do think there is an opportunity for us to, and I would like the board's support for us to be able to roll this summary forward to our municipalities and give them the opportunity to see maybe a little bit more information about what this is. And then if municipal councils are prepared to, that they would be able to provide comments as well.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it would be good to have a response from the Conservation Authority that attempted to reinforce its commitment to science-based decision-making for the good of the environment. I appreciate some of the concerns that are being addressed in the proposed legislation to get rid of red tape or allow a different approach to development, and that there's a political agenda there. But I think the Conservation Authority's dedication to preserving the environment and species at risk, I think, needs to be reiterated. And again, the science-based approach is I think what we should be about, and we're always trying to, of course, balance that with the need for development. But this new legislation, I think, tips the balance perhaps too much in the direction of the political. Although there are aspects of it that I think municipalities wanted. In our function here on this board, I think we have to at least genuflect in the direction of science and preservation of the environment. So if there were to be a response, I'd like to see some language to that effect in the conservation's statement about the proposed legislation. That's just my ideas for the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Larry, did I cut you off? You were continuing on.
No, thank you, Chair Joe. No, that I concur entirely with what I have just heard from John. It is my concern, really, that this legislation, the Conservation Authority bodies, it's my fear, are being viewed by the province as an impediment to development and not an important partner. And what I've just heard there, I think both sides, the political and the science side, have to be blended in as we move forward. And to blank one out at the expense of the other, to me, is very concerning.
Mike, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we are at a crossroads in terms of the mandates that, and this goes back to the discussion that we had a half a year ago about where we see the proper role of the St. Clair Conservation Authority as it relates to development, as it relates to protection of species, as it relates to what is our role? What should we be doing? The problem is we never got to that point. We never got to the discussion because the meeting that was intended to be held at Lambton County Chambers never happened. And because of that, we really are in a bit of a vacuum in terms of what we as a board believe our mandate should be, which in my opinion needs to be clearly more defined than what it is now. And essentially that's what the minister has done, is done that clarification for us. So really, it's almost like winding the clock back to going through that exercise where we say, okay, this is what we should be doing. This is what we should not be doing. Because in that summary that you just went through, there are things that I agree that need to be challenged, but there are others, as Al Broad has indicated, that many of the municipalities have been asking for. And I agree with some of those. So the point is, when we haven't even defined what our role is, how can we make comment or decisions on what the minister is saying without at least knowing where we stand? And I don't think we know where we stand, quite frankly. Thank you.
Okay. Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would move that we ask the staff to prepare a response for our next board meeting for us to debate and to send on to the minister. And if in the meantime we could have that report also sent to the individual municipalities so that they can look into it, and we can come back to the board meeting with not only our own personal opinions as board members, but with input from our own municipalities into how we feel this should move forward.
Can I have a seconder for that motion? Mike, discussion on the motion? Lori? Lori, you're muted.
I'd like to know how the things that have been donated to us, the parcels of land and the other things that are part of the Conservation Authority, to ours particularly, are going to be protected or looked after. I don't see anything in there that says existing things remain under the control of the Conservation Authority. I'm worried that things that we already own could be put into a bad situation, and there's been nothing discussed about that on this. It seems to be all about moving forward, and yet each Conservation Authority already has a certain amount of things that create the base of it, and if you don't have that looked after, what's going to happen to them?
Okay. I don't see any other hands. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Joe. Just what's the time frame on the province moving ahead with this legislation? We wouldn't want to send this to the municipalities and review this at our next meeting, and would we have time to do all that before these changes were made?
Go ahead, Brian.
That's a very good question, Mark, and I'm not sure that I have a good answer. Based on what we got from the ministry staff on Monday, they will be coming back to the House on Monday of next week. Realistically, they're anticipating a second reading of the bill next week for sure. And then third reading, that's kind of a little more up in the air. I don't know whether we would still be able to provide our comments prior to a third reading if we wait for our meeting in the 10th of December ballpark.
Terry, go ahead.
Yes, I understand the way the process works is that the second reading, it gets referred to committee, and then the committees will make their comments on all the various parts of the budget. It's a budget. It's not just this piece of legislation. So it's quite broad. So I would not expect this to come back for actual final vote till well into April, May. I have to be honest with you. March maybe at the earliest.
Okay. Frank Ennis.
Yeah, my experience with government as well is they may pass the act, but the real meat is in the regulations, and I expect those haven't even been looked at or tackled yet. So it could be, it could be, I think as Brian said earlier, a year before they have the regulations in place to actually implement any of this stuff. So,
okay. Al, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Joe. I agree with Brian. I'm a little concerned on the timeline because, I know this government moves fairly quick to move things through. And I think to send it back to the councils and expect them to send back information and then move forward from there might be too tight on the timelines. I think Brian's able, he's got his concerns down here, and I think Brian can represent the board and send off his concerns to what he has with what's going on there. Send a copy out to municipalities, let the individual municipalities send their concerns off or find find out if they can get some answers for Brian or for the municipality. But I am concerned about the timelines that we're kind of talking here of sending it back and forth. And I think Brian can do an excellent job sending it off.
Okay, Terry, you made that motion. Are you in agreement with Al's comments on that? And
oh, it's just really a timing thing. I think there's lots of time, to be honest with you. We have our meeting in December. I don't see the legislation being passed by then. So I think there's, and I think it is an important piece of legislation. I think the municipality should have a talk on it. And I think the Conservation Authority should have a vote on it as well, to be honest with you. So.
okay, we'll leave the motion as is then, unless somebody wants to amend it. Did you have a question? Lori, go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering if maybe we should be withdrawing the motion and allowing Brian to just to go ahead. If it was sent to all the municipalities, they would have the opportunity to send right on to the people that issued this themselves. Oftentimes we do that, we support, or we do other things. So I think I'm going to withdraw my second.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
I think I seconded that motion, and my seconding stands.
Okay.
Because I believe there are issues that need to be discussed. As an example, if we were to give Brian the authority to represent us in terms of all of those issues, I do not agree that as an organization, we should be able to file a complaint to LPAT. I think we should be a resource, but we should not be a body that can file a complaint. So clearly, there's an example where this particular motion would allow SCRCA, as an example, to come back to the table with a discussion point related to that particular issue. So I do not believe that we as an organization should have the authority to mount an appeal to a particular development. Once a council has made a decision to allow a development to go forward, we should not have, the St. Clair Conservation Authority should not have the authority to challenge that individually. So my seconding of the motion stands. I want the councils to have input into issues like that. Thank you.
Kevin, did you have your hand up?
I did not, Joe.
Okay, sorry. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. No, I think I can support this motion. It sounds like we have time to talk about this at the next meeting and to forward it on to the municipalities for their comments. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? 1, 2, 3. 3 opposed. Motion's carried. Okay, is there anything else in, let me see here, where we at? Yeah, is there any other comments or anything you want to make in the general manager's report, Brian?
I think the only other item may be in response to Mike's comments. I now feel I do have at least a baseline to prepare, you know, those mandatory core, whatever we want to call them, that are provincial, that are municipal, that are authority, and prepare that initial report that we had talked about prior. I think I can, timeline might be a little bit tight for November, but I can, or for December's meeting, but my intent moving forward will be to have that ready for board discussion for the December meeting.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, Frank Ennis?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I mean, many of us are part of more than one conservation authority as well. So I think this motion gives us the opportunity to coordinate our municipal view, because I expect each conservation authority's view may be a little bit different. So I think this gives the municipality a chance to coordinate its response as well. So.
Yeah. And I agree with that because we have two in our area as well, and it'd be nice to know what they're thinking as well, and sort of come up with something that's doable for everyone, I guess, type thing. So I don't see any other hands. Is there anybody opposed to the general manager's report? Seeing none, the report's approved. Okay, 5.2, that the board of directors is, can I have a mover and a seconder that the board of directors acknowledges the report dated 2020 regarding the available reserves to fund the proposed service delivery review consultation as quoted by Tim Dobbin and Brian, I guess you have some comments on that.
Yes, and more or less further that I'll provide you with a report verbally on the process to date.
Okay.
So maybe if we want to talk about the where to draw the money from. So in your report, or in your package, I provided a breakdown using the audited financial statements from last year. So specifically looking at where we could draw the money from as was directed by the board when we approved this study. And more or less, without taking a lot of time to get into it, first and foremost, I guess what we need to say is that these reserves are not really intended to be operating reserves. None of them. They're all specific to some particular project, and that's why those funds have been put away that way. However, I would say that more or less the vehicles and equipment reserve and the administrative center reserve are the two that would be able to support this without a huge loss, where we'd be able to ensure that the reserves remain stable if we're drawing half or all of those dollars out of either one of those reserves.
Okay, are we looking for a motion to draw it out of one of those reserves, Brian?
I think that would be best, yes.
Okay, can I get a motion to draw? Go ahead, Pat. You're muted, Pat, sorry.
Sorry. Does it matter if we take out of one or the other, or what if we suggested 50-50? Does that work?
Yes, that would work very well.
Okay, I'll move that we take the cost of our service delivery 50% from the equipment reserve and 50% from the admin center reserve.
Okay, did you want to second that, Frank, Kenneth? Okay, thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Brian, would we not use that conservation services? Would that not be a reserve we would take that out of?
That one in particular is pretty specific to support of forestry, especially support in the ongoing years after something's already been established. So I didn't feel that even though that one's got significant dollars in it, I didn't think that was one we should be tapping into for a study of this nature, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Is anyone opposed to the motion? I see none. Motion's carried. Okay, 6.1, mover and a seconder that the board of directors acknowledges the consent agenda and endorses the recommendations accompanying items 6.1A to 6.1M. Can I have a mover? Okay, Jan and Terry. Questions? Is there anyone wanting any of them pulled? Larry, go ahead.
If I may, 6.1B, the current watershed conditions, Great Lakes levels. Okay. If Emily's on the line, perhaps she could just give us an overview. I know we've had some decline, it appears, at least on Lake Huron, and reading the numbers here, but if we could get maybe just an overview of where she thinks we are and where we're heading.
Mr. Chair.
Right, yeah.
We don't have Emily available, but I think Garish could speak to this for us.
Okay, go ahead, Garish.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We are starting the decline, as you may have seen in the report. We are looking at anywhere between 2 to 4 inches below our seasonal October highs. So we are in the downward trend. Things are looking good. In terms of the rainfall, in terms of the total basin contribution for the lake for the last 3 months, we have been lower. So that indicates that if the trend were to continue, we would be looking at the levels dropping quickly and below the highs that we have seen in the last 2 years.
Is there any other questions, concerns? Any other items that you'd like pulled? Seeing none, the motion's carried. Whoops, a mover. Oh, sorry, Larry.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I note in 61M, the St. Clair River area of concern, that the funding for RAP coordination runs through March 2022. I just wanted to point that out, that given the discussion we've just had here in the past half hour in our relationship with funding and provincial oversight and so on, that is a fairly significant funding. Am I right? If through you, Chair Joe, to Brian?
Okay, go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is very, very, to our perspective, it is very significant. There are certainly things that both the province and the federal government are looking for our assistance to get done. They are things on their work list that we are working with them on in order to make things happen on a local basis. So we see that support with one hand anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, very good. Okay, Frank Ennis.
On 61F, that's the statement of revenue and expenditures. That middle, the middle columns in the chart there, annual budget prorated. It says 3 months ended March 31st, 20. Should that be 9 months ended September 30, 20? And it was just a question on I guess, actual to budget. I realize that the budget is just a prorated number, but we're showing to be ahead about $426,000 in revenue and almost $1 million under expenses. And I appreciate a lot of that is probably timing, but with 50 days left in the year, just wondered where the projections are in terms of especially expenditures. Are they timing issues, or are they permanent, some permanent savings on expenditures this year?
Tracy, are you there to address that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, it's timing issues. Sometimes projects, because of our year end compared to the granting year end, because the province year end is March 31st. Our year end is December 31st. We do have projects that may be in process, but may not be completed, and may not get completed till March 31st. So we may have received some of the money, maybe not all of the money. There is some big projects that Grisha is working on, and there's also some, I understand, some issues with some of them. So that will affect the final numbers as well once those all come in. So in some cases with our granting, we have actually 120 days still left in our recording period for the grant projects. And as for the dates, probably it should be prorated till the end of the actual period, which I believe was September.
Okay. Is there any other hands? Brad, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, and I apologize if I've missed it here. Did we receive any monies from the province regarding our COVID costs? And maybe we don't, maybe we can't, but I just wondered if we did similar to what the municipalities have received.
Tracy, do you want to respond to that too?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. We did receive, we were only eligible for the relief on our taxes. our CRA taxes, we were not eligible for the relief on payroll. So we did receive the $30,000, which was used up fairly quickly. We think we got through that before the end of May. And that's the only COVID money we were able to access.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Have I missed anyone? Okay, the motion's been carried. We'll go to 7.1. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the Board of Directors acknowledges a report dated October the 27th, 2020 regarding the 2021 conservation area proposed fees and approvals, and approves a fee schedule as presented. Steve and Frank Nemchek, is there any questions? Al, go ahead.
Thanks, Chairman Joe. Can we pull the Highland Glen boat fees out of the schedule there? I presume if we get a report back from the consultant and we do a bunch of expenditure, I would hope that fee schedule would be increased significantly. So can we pull that out just so it doesn't get caught in there, and just put maybe a comment to fees to be determined when boat launches reopen?
Okay, is there any problem with doing that, Brian?
No, I think we could do that.
Okay, okay. Does that need to be an amendment to the motion?
It likely should be, yes.
Okay, friendly amendment, is that okay? We have a mover and a seconder, don't we, Ashley?
Yes.
Yeah. The mover, are you okay with that amendment? And I'm not sure who that was.
Steve
it was me, and I'm okay.
Steve, you're okay, and the seconder?
Was Frank Nemchek.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Brad, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, it's the same with fees for services. I still, at this time, and at least for this year, I'm against that. I don't think we should be doing any increase in fees until next year because of this COVID. But that's just my feeling. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Any opposed to the motion? I see 1, 2. Yep. Motion carries. Okay. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the Board of Directors acknowledges a report dated October 29, 2019 on the ongoing shoreline projects across the watershed, and further that the Board of Directors authorizes the Chair and General Manager to sign contract documents if the preferred tender falls within budget. I have a mover. Okay, Kevin and Mike. Questions? Go ahead, Larry.
Through you, Chair, to Garish, the Kenwick to Helena situation, the tow problem underwater there, and we were looking for some resolution or completion on that here in the next days or weeks. I wonder if we could get an update on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Larry, we're referring to the phase 2 of the project that was completed by Cope Construction. We had identified about 17 locations with the tow issues. They are trying to fix it with the use of barge, which is our preferred approach still. It offers some interesting challenges because they are working about 10 feet below the surface of the lake, and placing those stones are very challenging. Hence the need for more extremely qualified contractors, and which is why we're going the RFSQ route for the projects that are planned for this year, later this year. They are still on track, and based on the conversations we're having with them, they are looking to fix it by end of November. We're still wanting to fix the shoreline with the preferred approach, which is using a barge. We're not currently looking at any option 2 at this point. But if the barge approach is not going to work, we may resort to a plan B.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Mike, sorry.
Yes, through you to Garesh as well. I know that there are lawsuits pending on this particular, not this particular site, but in general, in the whole project. So where are we in terms of the legal situation? And 2, the second part of the question would be, SCRCA Incorporated is doing the work on the Old Lakeshore East, and they appear to be doing a very successful operation down there. Why would COPE not be utilizing the same strategy that SCRCA is using in terms of what they're doing? If they're successful, why should it be such an issue for COPE? Thank you.
Go ahead,
through you, Mr. Chair. I should offer thanks to the staff of City of Sarnia for helping us out immensely with the legal situation. And this is with respect to the phase 3 work that Amico had been contracted to do. We are negotiating with Amico, or the lawyers from the City of Sarnia is contacting Amico's lawyer, and they are figuring out what the best way to move forward is at this point. The negotiations are still happening, and we have not reached a common platform as yet. The next round of negotiation is scheduled for next week, and I can keep you informed about what happens moving forward. Question number 2, SCRCA has been doing an incredibly good job, and I would request your attention to the picture that's in front of you, and the turquoise sort of shade on the rock. Because of the presence of copper, it really blends in with the lake. And not only just the aesthetic look of it, but also the placement of the toe stones has been really, really good, which is partly because of the methodology. The equipment is able to build that platform, and through that platform they are able to get a better feel for placement of the stones. It is not only attributed to the building of the platform, the methodology, but it is also the contractor. The contractors that SCRCA is using, they're extremely trained, and you would agree that it's placing a puzzle type of work, and that really benefits SCRCA in this situation. And COPE, though they had a good start to the project, the toes were not at the 17 locations, were not positioned properly, and there could be a number of other reasons that could have gone wrong in the placement of those stones. And it was really hard for our consulting engineer to pinpoint those 17 locations during the placement of the rocks because of the inability to look through water, the turbid water, and look to see where those toe stones are exactly being placed.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Any opposed to the motion? Motion's carried. Motion 7.3, can I have a mover and a seconder that the 2020 nominating committee consisting of the following 4 directors representing the 4 districts of the authority, being Sarnia, Lambton, Chatham-Kent, and Middlesex, be, and then further that the nominating committee recommendations for the 2021 committee membership be presented at the annual general meeting. So a list of the members that were present last year was Terry Burrow, Ron Shank, Carmen McGregor, Betty Ann McKinnon. So I guess Can I have volunteers, I guess? Is that the way we do that, Brian?
That's the easiest.
Okay. I'll nominate Alan or Aaron Hall for Chatham Kent. I see he's not there. Terry Burrell. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Aaron. Go ahead. You okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
I forgot my video wasn't on there. Thanks.
Okay. No, that's good. Terry Burrell for Sarnia. Is that okay?
Yes, I'll volunteer for that if that's okay with Mike.
Absolutely. You are my nominee.
Okay. Betty Ann McKinnon, are you the current rep? Are you okay with that? Or is everybody from Middlesex okay with that, I guess?
I'm fine with that if everyone else wants that.
Okay. So, and then Natty, are you okay with you're muted, Natty?
I would like to decline, if I could, please.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
I would like to decline.
Okay.
I don't think I'm familiar enough with everything.
Okay, okay. Is there someone that's interested in that then? Can I have a volunteer? Okay, Lori? Okay. So I guess we have our numbers, do we? Okay, that sounds good. So Betty Ann, Lori, Terry, and Aaron, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, is there any opposed to that motion? The motion's carried.
Sorry, Joe, I don't think we got a mover and a seconder for
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder? Okay, is Larry and Pat? Okay, and nobody opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, item 7.4. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the Board of Directors approves the 2021 tentative schedule of meetings for the Board of Directors and committees dated September the 21st, 2020? Okay, it's Mark and Betty Ann. Any opposed to that? Motion's carried.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just maybe one point of interest here. We certainly have been working well with our Zoom calls. I do want to note that the intended AGM, which would be celebrating or taking us into our 60th year, was intended to be in Point Edward next February. Unfortunately, making what I would consider to be a very unfortunate result of this would mean that we would likely not be in a position to have that AGM in Point Edward or face-to-face likely. However, we will continue to watch conditions and regardless, I think even if we were able to be face-to-face, it would be a much smaller celebration than we would normally intend for an AGM.
Okay. I guess we'll be kept up to date as to how conditions change on that then. So, okay, is there any other comments regarding the schedule of meetings? Seeing none, motion's approved. Is there any new business to be brought forward? Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to bring to the attention of the board the fact that we have a serious problem at Cow Creek, formerly Perch Creek, in the Brights Grove area, which happens to be coincidentally adjoining the shoreline work that we're doing. There's a significant dredging issue, and I'm wondering whether the St. Clair Conservation Authority would either have comment or any jurisdiction with respect to potential dredging of that particular creek, or whether dredging is appropriate, or who would be responsible, all sorts of questions along those lines.
Okay, who can answer that, Brian?
I can certainly chime in, but I'll ask any staff that want to clarify for me. We certainly, it would be a work within a water course, so it would fall under a Section 28 regulation approval. We would certainly be able to provide comment, as well as potentially assist the city in negotiating with some of the other commenters. Both the province and the federal government would likely have branches that would be prepared to commit to this. Transport Canada specifically under and with the Coast Guard on the federal side. The one item that I saw brought forward that I haven't been able to verify myself was a statement regarding safe harbor within Cow Creek. I didn't believe that existed, and I haven't been able to clarify it. I'll maybe speak with city staff about that as to where that clarification comes from. But certainly Department of Fisheries and Oceans as well, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry under the Lakes and Rivers Improvement Act would also be at the table. So hopefully we can maybe assist the city in at least bringing everybody together so that we're all getting the same story and can provide information back to the city.
Okay, Mike, go ahead. Continuation on that.
Yes. Further to that, obviously we are now entering into budget season, and not my concern, my query, it also involves whether there are potential funding sources that St. Clair Conservation can access, and with particular reference to the success that St. Clair Conservation has had on shoreline protection. Would there be funding opportunities that are available to St. Clair Conservation that the city can access? Thank you.
Brian?
Nothing comes immediately to mind. However, as with everything, we're prepared to look under every rock. So we will we'll certainly try and endeavor to do that over the next couple of weeks, provide anything back to city staff as we're moving through it, and report back to you at the next board meeting.
Okay, continuation again?
Yes, just to follow up, and my final comment would be, could we have any potential funding sources be made available to city staff by the 1st of December to enable the discussion during budget session to encompass that potential? Thank you.
Brian, you're okay
Yes,
with?
certainly. Yes, we will do that.
Okay, great. Okay. Brad, you had a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just, and it's been brought to my attention. I didn't realize this, and I think it's probably set by the province. But I see in Lambton County, our assessment per $100,000 is $4.74. But yet, if you go to Middlesex Center, they only pay 76 cents per $100,000 of assessment. And I guess I kind of thought that would be pretty well the same. Is there a reason for that, or why is there such a difference in assessment? And again, it may be set by the province, but it just seems like from $4.74 to 76 cents seems like a big difference.
Brian or Tracy?
Tracy, do you want to handle that?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. So it comes down to when we apply the amount per assessed value, it's based on the complete municipality. So Middlesex Center, for example, we have very small percentage of our watershed in their municipality. So when we apply it to their whole assessment value. So that's why there's such a variance. So in the, and that's how you apply it as a municipality. So Middlesex Center doesn't go to the taxpayers in our watershed and only apply our levy to them. They apply it across as their full budget. So in a municipality that's fully in our watershed, like Point Edward, they would also, it would be reflected based on what their assessment values are.
It's just confusing, but thank you for that.
Okay, Al, go ahead.
Just to clarify for Brad, that's just an average. I think if you go to Don Euphemia, I think we're $12 or $13 per 100,000 of assessments. So that $4 and something is just an average across the entire watershed is what it is.
Oh.
So the $4 is just an average, not a true value for everybody.
And that makes sense. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. Terry, go ahead.
Yes, just to sort of follow up on this Cow Creek thing, I was wondering if that in the analysis they can make some connection with the fact that there's no safe harbor at Highland Glen, which is the sort of the next harbor going north or northeast, if somehow the fact that that is not available as a safe harbor, having at least the mouth of the Cow Creek available for emergencies might help us to leverage some funds. Because it'd be easier to dig out Cow Creek than to replace everything that needs to be replaced at Highland Glen.
I could certainly look into it from that perspective as well. Maybe that might have an impact on those potential funding sources.
Okay. All right, is there any other new business that anyone wants to bring forward? Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you, Joe, Mr. Chair. Just was hoping for staff to address the situation. I know there was, at the end of October, there was a fire at, outside of Wallaceburg at the Snowmobile Club. And I know I touched base with staff about that, but maybe just to make the whole board aware. Just a question to that. I wonder if staff can kind of provide an update on that and just whether there was any, environmental concerns or anything, because I know it's right, the former Snowmobile Club was right adjacent to the Pierce wetland property. So could Brian or someone from staff maybe just give an update on what the status is and whether there's any concern?
I'm going to pass that one along to Greg. I think he'll be able to provide us with he's been on site, let's put it that way, and I have not, so.
Okay, yeah, I was on site. So that was the lease we had with the Wallaceburg Snowmobile Club that we did not renew for 2021. They were in the process of removing all the contents of that building. They had stripped steel off the roof, siding was off, so a lot of the structure wasn't there and the contents were gone. They were supposed to have a contractor coming around the end of the month to tear that building down. So that building doesn't belong to us, it belonged to the Snowmobile Club. There was a fire on, I believe, the 30th of October. It pretty well burnt to the ground. We went ahead and had it cleaned up last Friday by a contractor. There was some metal, glass, and some debris that would be a concern for public safety. So we've had that cleanup completed, and I'm waiting on the invoice, and I will approach the Snowmobile Club with that invoice. Hopefully their insurance can cover that cleanup cost. I don't think there was any big environmental concern. We had maybe a couple of trees suffer minor damage from the heat. It didn't look like much ended up in the pond, and it was mostly a wooden structure at this point because so much had been removed, and it just, it appeared to me to be just burnt up largely.
Great, thanks for that update. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's good, thank you. Okay, is there any other new business? Seeing no hands, I guess I'm looking for a motion that we adjourn. Brad and Dan, any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. I think we've had a good discussion today and covered a lot of issues. So thank you very much and look forward to meeting in December. Thank you.